I run a company called uncollege.org, and we provide resources for people who want to learn outside the classroom. So we do gap year programs, we do some consulting with colleges and universities, and provide communities for people who don't feel served by the educational system.
Great. So you were on creativeLIVE for a 3-day workshop where we talked about a lot of the alternative opportunities to education, how to educate yourself outside of the sort of traditional university system in particular. And we're kindred spirits in that alternate education paths for individuals. What have you been up to since you were on creativeLIVE? Do I have to use this microphone? I have to use this microphone. So no one has heard a thing I've said. we're more casual here in Studio D.
I can still answer the question of
what have you been up to?
What I've been up to. So as we talked about during my course, I launched a book called Hacking Your Education that Penguin published in March. That came out. It was great. I did all kinds of things and on the Today Show and went to a couple different countries and was really awesome. And at the same time, we launched applications for a gap year program that's launching this September. We got about 200 applications for 10 spots.
So tell us a little bit more about what Gap Year is, because I think it's a really cool program.
Yeah, so we're taking 10 people through the year-long process of what not going to college actually looks like, helping them figure out how to find mentors, how to be self-motivated, how to design trips abroad.
There's a perception about what not going to college means.
Right, precisely. Yeah, I mean, and we don't see this as taking time off, but rather taking time on. So the actual structure of the program is that the participants spend 3 months together in San Francisco. They go abroad for 3 months, and they do an internship for 3 months, and then do an independent creative project.
And when we say
3 months.
An internship abroad, this is not backpacking through Europe.
Right. This is going and volunteering on an organic farm, or going and living in a Tibetan monastery, or going and being a deckhand on a ship. Something that is intellectually and stimulating and engaging. And for the time that they live together for the 3 months in San Francisco, we've designed a very specific curriculum around meta-learning skills that make you a better and more effective learner. A lot of the things that we talked about during my creativeLIVE session. So each week is themed around things like how to find mentors, how to build relationships, how to keep yourself motivated, how to communicate effectively, all the kinds of things that will be useful both in school and for the rest of your life. And are the kinds of things that school's supposed to teach you, and you're supposed to learn by extension of turning in that book report or doing that history paper, but no one ever bothers to actually teach you how to do.
Let's go into that a little bit more. So these, like finding mentors, and this is really something that I found when I got out of school is like I graduated with a university degree from a decent school, and then I got into the real world, and I was completely incapable in my first couple jobs. It was almost sad. Talk to us about that kind of gap that the skills that you teach that aren't part of traditional education. Maybe go into that a little bit more.
When you go and talk to employers and you look at the kinds of surveys that like IBM and Accenture and Deloitte and McKinsey do, you keep coming back to employers wanting skills like people who are like creativity, collaboration, being able to work well with each other, being able to find and determine goals. And there are all the sorts of things that are helpful to get from point A to point B, but that's not a process that you're ever required to do in school because the teacher is giving you assignments all along the way. So we're trying to create people who can be given an assignment, are able to figure out what the steps are that are needed to get to the end goal, are able to find the resources, are able to parse and analyze the information, are able to go and find mentors and ask for help along the way, and then deliver the product in a way that is meaningful and appropriate.
I've found that the process of asking for help for me personally was incredibly difficult, and it literally took me years, probably like a decade before I was comfortable asking for help and not having the right answer. And I think that's one of the things that school ingrains in you. You're supposed to work by yourself, study the book, memorize the material, and there's a right or wrong answer. And if you don't know it, there's one person who you can ask for help, the teacher. Whereas in the real world, it's very different.
And in fact, you're rewarded in the real world for being vulnerable and admitting that you don't know. And the incentive structure is totally flipped from the way it is in school. So we're trying to take people and help them shift their mindset and paradigm structure to one that mimics the real world and is frankly healthier for people who want to be lifelong learners.
Yeah. And I think that is we talk about the secrets from Silicon Valley, which is what this event is all about. For me, that's one of the biggest secrets of Silicon Valley, is that this is an open network of people who actively share what they're working on, their knowledge base, and are incredibly proactive about asking for help. It's pretty unbelievable. How is there any advice that you have for maybe the folks in the room or the folks watching virtually? How do you ask for help when you're in a learning process, when you're in a discovery process?
When I'm asking for help and when I see people asking me for help, it's most helpful if you can make your ask as specific as possible. Not, I'm dropping out of college, what do I do? But here, I dropped out of college, I have a year, I have X amount of money. What might be some good ways to spend my time? If you can narrow the request, it's much easier to answer it.
And so how do you go about identifying the right mentors? So for myself, I run marketing here at creativeLIVE, and I have an informal network of mentors that I've formed, and I've targeted each person individually. Like, okay, she is an amazing PR person. I'm gonna recruit her to be my PR mentor. And then this guy knows a lot about brand stuff, so I'm going to go to him for the brand questions. Because identified that
Mm-hmm.
where my gaps are, and I've actively recruited individuals. What are some of the recruitment techniques? These people that are part of my network, so I'm very fortunate that I can get introductions. But how do you recruit someone who you might not have direct access to?
It's been an interesting process for me over the course of the last, even, say, 6 months. The process of writing a book was something that I was very much familiar with and very much had a network of contacts that were able to support me in that process. And now as we're going into launching Gap Year, it's a very different process and requires learning a lot of things that I haven't had a lot of experience with. So I found myself being in that position of reaching out to people for the first time to ask questions about insurance, for example, or dealing with lawyers, or payroll taxes, or lots of fun stuff like that is terribly engaging that everyone loves to talk about, right?
But those are the questions that every entrepreneur has, right?
Yeah, and it's been interesting to see which types of people are able to answer those questions, because there's a lot of people that I've talked to who've simply outsourced that problem to someone else. And the people running the companies don't actually know the answers to those questions, which I've found fascinating. And I've been grateful. So it took me a couple tries of first figuring out what the right questions were to be asked, right? So I found out asking for someone with help with insurance was not very helpful, right? Asking about...
You get a guy trying to sell you a car policy.
Right, exactly. So you need to ask about, liability and property and directors and officers insurance and very specific things that apply to my business.
Sure. And so when making that ask, do you just email people? Do you post stuff on Facebook? Where have you found your... how have you actually recruited the people individually?
It generally starts with me reaching out to people who I know in my network via email to ask if they can help directly, and if not, if they can direct me to someone else. With questions about insurance, it usually ends up with them directing me to their insurance agents or something like that. And then is frequently a process of them saying, oh, we don't serve your type of business. Here's someone else who you can talk to who might. So with that particular question, it's been a lot of passing between people to find the right person who can serve our need.
Sure. Let's kind of change topic a little bit and start to talk about the service side of what we both do, which is trying to help provide alternate paths to education for people who might not be served by the current formal education structure. What does it mean to... So you're someone who essentially dropped out of the formal education process, and now you yourself are an educator. What does that mean to you? Tell me about the population that you serve and why that's important to you.
I think what's most important to me is seeing people who have been alienated by the system, who feel like they've been coerced into going to school, come to on college and be part of a community that is a community of misfits, and that's a place where they fit. And they're frequently not only misfits in terms of who they are, in terms of their education, but maybe they're like very different from their family in terms of religion, or they are an immigrant to another country, or something like this. And so it's really amazing to see people who have been so outside of the system really be able to come together and make friends over the course of a few days. And I think that's the thing that keeps me doing what I do, to see people who have been so alienated and feel so alone and feel so unsupported. To be able to make them feel like they have a home is really special. And
give them a path to pursue their dreams in a way that they never would have thought possible.
Yeah, and to help them understand that leaving a system does not mean abandoning it, but rather building your own. And there's a very direct process and very attainable process that you can go through to forge that path by yourself.
That's awesome. Any words of advice to our community of creative entrepreneurs who are in the room or are all over the world?
I think that just the fact that you've taken the time to show up, to either be here or to watch, means that you're on the right track. And I encourage you to keep doing that and to keep showing up, to keep making progress, to keep motivating yourself, and being self-directed.
That is fantastic. I think, do we have any questions for Dale from the folks in the room? Dun, dun, dun. Not, yeah. There's a stick microphone over here on the, or there was a stick microphone, but I stole it. It's on the other side over here. There we go.
Hey, I haven't fully formed this question yet, so bear with me.
That's good. You don't have to. This is the casual room. This is a hangout.
Oh yeah, oh, good point.
You can pass it to yourself.
Just like lean back.
Right. Yeah, and you can throw questions to yourself as well.
Cut to me on the couch. So I'm imagining there's this point, I'm not sure how long ago, where you have the idea for it and you're ready to start the application process. Can you talk through any concrete asks or just like how you broke down the process of going from the program's already figured out from research, and then like how do we find people? How do we convince people to apply? How do we find everyone?
So it started out as a friend of mine suggesting, Michael Staten, who'll be here today, who's been a great mentor and friend. So it was like, you should do a 5-year program. And then I sort of had a conniption fit, like, I'm 20, I can't commit myself for 5 years, like, what does that mean? So I was like, let's do a gap year program. I was like, I can commit to a year, like, that sounds reasonable. And so I wrote some copy for it and put it up on the website last fall. And by December, we'd had like 400 people sort of fill out basic demographic information, name, age, location, et cetera. And then I was like, oh, I guess we should actually like design an application for this. So we did that and put it up in January, and by the end of March, we'd had 200 or so people fill out full applications, write essays, upload videos, who were interested in joining us. And then since then, it's been a really fun process of figuring out what the actual logistics are. Joe Welch is right behind you, is our house manager for the San Francisco location. We also have a program director, Dylan Evans. And together, we've been designing the curriculum and figuring out the actual logistics of getting it off the ground. And I'm really excited. We've done 3-day-long workshops before, both with creativeLIVE and as offline academic camps. And it's amazing to see what comes out of those, and I'm really excited to see what happens when we put people together for longer and give them that safe space.
There's something. One of the secrets of getting started is getting started.
Yeah.
And is there something to Tim Ferriss and Ramit Sethi, a couple of other instructors in the creativeLIVE network, have talked about putting something out into the world to create a sort of promise to your community and then having to live up to that. Is there something about that you have seen as valuable for yourself and as valuable for
sure. I mean, I think mostly what holds people back is the being afraid of the consequences of what happens if you don't follow it through. And the reality is that there aren't really many consequences. If you put something up and no one signs up and you take it down, maybe you'll get a couple emails asking why it came down. And if they email you, answer honestly. Say, it didn't get traction, it didn't work, it wasn't a good idea, we're trying something else now. And on the flip side, if it does work and there is interest and there is traction and people keep talking about it, then do it. Try it.
So what you're talking about is, I think, a second secret of Silicon Valley is the acceptance of failure and the willingness to try things, and it's okay if it doesn't work out. Putting out a smart test to gather interest and information. Maybe you could. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that the way that failure has been glorified is a good thing. I mean, I think it's okay to have failures and talk about them as failures and not like pretend that all failures are just like wonderful learning experiences and there wasn't anything that went wrong. Like, sure, it was a failure and sure you learned from it, but you should recognize that it didn't work.
Shouldn't be the goal.
Yeah, for sure. Which is very odd in many ways that has become the goal. It's like, oh, I'm going to try this startup that's going to purposely fail, and it's weird. But I think the other secret is that there's a bit of confidence that's involved, right? And having that confidence and willpower is something that can be built, and it's not just that people are aiming for failure, but have the confidence to actually go out and try things.
To put something out into the world and say, I'm going to try to do this thing, and try to gather interest in people around you who are going to support your dreams and goals. Is there something specific that you are thinking about, you are maybe trying to do, and you're trying to gather a network? Or tell us maybe a little bit more about your particular situation.
I mean, my particular situation is I'm trying to find a community of people who I'm not a part of, and are very difficult to find. So I'm just curious.
What community is that?
So people who are looking for medical travel. There's a lot of SEO traffic for this right now, but there's not communities for these people to go. It's just part of what I'm trying to build. So there's a lot of really inefficient ways that I'm looking now, like Craigslist posts and hope someone happens upon it, or Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, that kind of thing. But it's a pretty slow process. So I'm just sort of collecting anecdotes of how people are getting their word out, how people are managing that process when you don't have an audience yet or don't have customers yet.
Sure. Is there, so one of the things that, I've heard from some of our other instructors, one of the best things about my job is I get to watch the best teachers and experts in the world come in and tell people or give people advice on how to do things, and then I get to regurgitate it later and sound like I have an idea. Have you thought about looking for comparable paths? So, for example, a friend of mine is trying to build a community of people interested in foreign exchange programs. It's called GoOverseas.com. Mitch Gordon he's an entrepreneur in residence at the University of California, Berkeley Haas School of Business, and has built this from scratch when there wasn't a community previously of students interested in travel abroad. He built a website and a resource for them. I don't know if maybe you can find similar corollaries, reach out to those people and figure out how they built their kind of communities from scratch.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. I think the inbound marketing HubSpot kind of thing is useful too. Like, if one of the problems is that there's not a place for these people to go, then it's okay. It might be okay to spend a week propping up a forum for people to go, right? I'm also looking into just putting up sort of a landing page. Like, we used to do this for games. We could even test art or test titles by putting up a landing page and buying some ads for it. We assume that the demographic is going to be this data. Put up 5 versions of the ads that land on certain landing pages and compare how many people sign up at each of those options. So I think the answer might be following something similar to what he did, which is put something online, see if people find it, and just keep experimenting. Or
I wonder if there's any way to sort of reverse engineer the process and go towards like find out which hospitals are the most popular destination hospitals, and like spend a week there talking to people and handing out flyers. It would be a very offline way to do it, but I would imagine there are like a couple hospitals that have the most inbound.
Yeah, most countries actually have 1 or 2, world-class hospitals. They're trying to attract the best doctors and, patients from around the world too. So I had considered that as my own research. I'll go get a dental procedure somewhere. But I like the idea of finding the users that way in the first place too.
And then you'll and Dale and I are a couple of guys here, and this is what's great about Silicon Valley and the entrepreneurship community is just talking with people who have an idea and may be able to help with your idea, but going and actually seeing the place, talking to, if you can, patients that are there about how they discovered it, how they made this choice. It's a classic Steve Blank and Eric Ries kind of lean launchpad methodology of talking to the actual target population that you are interested in, and learning as much as you can about them.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm actually trying to just limit the number of things I'm building before I find out what the problems really are for real people, right? But in a way, I'm so used to having these conversations, like you said, with just people around, and someone just has an idea that clicks, and you realize they had an idea that saves you about a month sometimes, or the trip to the hospital,
Yeah, right, exactly. And I think what we're talking about, with failure, isn't it's okay to fail with your big concept, but it's definitely okay to fail with all your little tactics, and to put up a page and test it, and put up ads and test it, and talk to people about, hey, this is our value proposition. What do you think about it? And they're gonna like crap all over it, or they're gonna say that really resonates, and then you'll do more tests, and you kind of learn more along the way. And we're constantly testing stuff at creativeLIVE and trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work, what our current community responds to, how to build new community, and what they're going to want, because it's a changing environment all the time. And so, I mean, we miss as often as we hit. I saw another hand go up in the back. Do you have a question there? We'll pass the microphone over.
Thank you.
And maybe tell us a little bit about just your name, and a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hi, my name is Saya, and I am a massage therapist and a photographer. My question is, what did you find the best source of creating traction for the Uncollege?
So Uncollege has had an interesting life in its balance between traction and branding, and that's largely because my personal story is so interwoven with Uncollege. I quit school when I was 12.
You are Uncollege.
Right, yeah, and I would even argue that my personal brand is larger than Uncollege's is. And so initially, people signing up for the program and wanting to participate in our programs has been because of they've seen me and what I've done, and aspired to do something similar. And so I've been the branding and the marketing, and the proof that someone can not go to school and still be articulate and balance a checkbook.
And you're the charismatic founder archetype that we've seen. So that creates some initial interest in Uncollege, but I assume that there are other things that you've done as well, other than just like, I'm Dale and I'm awesome. You are. But so maybe go a little bit deeper into how you've gotten traction with your with Uncollege. Yeah.
So we first started by building a newsletter that was very actionable and relevant to our user base that came out every week. And initially, I would write columns about very specific problems that I would get via email about some piece of being self-directed. How do I talk to my parents? How do I keep myself motivated? How do I choose which online courses I'm going to do? And that's
and to be taking maybe one step previously, you've got an incredibly well-defined target population that you know incredibly well. It's people, misfits, which is a word you use all the time, who don't fit in with the current education system, who are at the same time motivated and willing to improve their lives on their own. That is an incredibly well-defined and target population that you can connect with on a really emotional level.
And by virtue of that, they end up being very self-motivated. And the fact that they take the initiative to reach out to us and engage means that they want to improve themselves. So it started out with the newsletter. We started. So
you provided a resource for a very well-defined target population, and you essentially gave this away for free.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I ended up doing a lot of speaking at conferences over the course of the last 2 years to give that target population a chance to interact with me and learn more about what we were doing.
So you provided access and more free information.
Yes.
Okay.
And that took a lot of time. I mean, I flew like 200,000 miles in about a year and a half, which was not fun.
But you got good frequent flyer status.
I did, though I don't care about that anymore. I did for a while, but that's besides the point. Anyway, and so then we started taking that to the next level and doing actual workshops. So we do weekend-long academic camps, which a version of became what we did for CreativeLIVE.
So you kind of built up a critical mass of people who were subscribing to your newsletter, showing up at your conferences, and then your speaking events, and you're like, hey, let's take this to the next level by, instead of me always going to people, bringing people to you. Together,
and bringing in other mentors and people who are self-directed that they could learn from and spend a weekend together with.
And that's really how CreativeLIVE, one of the ways that we kind of found one another was, I heard about the academic camps, and it was like, wow, it's a really similar model to what we're doing here, these 3-day-long deep engagements with a small population. And we thought that could be translated pretty well to a video setting, and it worked out great.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
And so everything you do, and then would you say that, so everything you do and every person you talk to, and the more community you build, you kind of creates a critical mass?
For sure, and in many ways, I mean, the academic camps themselves actually started as a testing ground for Gap Year. I said, okay, before we go and market a year-long program, let's go and see if we can get interest in a 3-day program.
Can we hang out with people and provide value over a weekend?
Yeah,
that's a great idea, rather than just jumping into a full year.
Yeah,
that's the sort of thing that doesn't necessarily seem. It seems very intuitive, but it's not necessarily something that you're going to think of, like taking those small steps to build up to a much larger vision.
And it's a version of A/B testing that is very offline in Silicon Valley, where everyone has a tech product. And to date, Uncollege does not have a technology product. We are not a technology company. We're an education company. We are a startup, but we do not have a tech product.
Yeah. Is there a particular scenario that you are working on that you're trying to gain traction for?
Yes, but I have another question before.
Okay.
Great. Can I ask?
I just want to do a little time check. We probably got about 4 minutes left with Dale before we move on to our next segment. So, but yeah, jump in.
I'm curious about your personal story. And
sure. Do you want to do that, or do you want something more specific and actionable?
I think Dale's personal story is pretty well documented. I don't mean to cut you off there. It's really engaging. It's super interesting, and it's really easy to find online. So maybe we can go to your second question.
How about your strategy of personally branding yourself?
I love that question. I don't mean to be the question arbiter, but that's a fantastic question.
It wasn't
as a
something.
12-year-old, how did you decide to brand yourself?
Yeah, I started using my middle initial when I was 12.
Sure.
So some of it was intentional, and some of it was unintentional, and some of it became intentional after being unintentional. So for example, I started using a J in the middle of my name when I first signed up for the internet because there were too many Dale Stevens online, and then that just became ubiquitous. And is my username on pretty much everything. So if you ever want to reach me, it's always Dale J. Stevens on literally everything. So that became a great way to see continuity across Facebook and Twitter and Gmail and so on and so forth. It was I got to a point probably about 6 months after starting Uncollege, so about 2 years ago, where I really sat down and asked my friends for their feedback on what my best and worst qualities were, and then did an assessment of who were the 10 people that I admired, both personally, that I knew personally, and people who were out in the environment that I admired as leaders.
Who were just a couple of those names that we might recognize if possible?
A couple of those names.
Dwayne "The Rock" Stevens?
I don't think so. I actually have no idea who that is. The one that pops to mind is Herb Kelleher.
Stevens. What's that?
Herb Kelleher, the founder of Southwest Airlines.
Yeah.
And then an assortment of people that I knew from Silicon Valley and were founders of companies and things like that.
Sure.
And tried to assess what their best and worst qualities were, and then compared those and tried to make some active changes in my life in terms of how I was perceived.
And then you tried, I assume, to put those qualities out into the work product that you created, the newsletter, the website.
Definitely.
You defined your story, your personality, and it sounds very deliberate, but it's also about becoming the person that you most want to be, which is an important thing about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and there were certain things that I felt like, you know, I might be being disingenuous to myself by trying to change or like purposely change myself, but most of them were actually really trivial things. So one thing, for example, was that I really love English and grammar and like using big words, and came to adopt a bunch of the rules, like never use a long word when a diminutive one will do.
Sure.
Or never use cliches like the plague.
Right. Awesome. I think that we're about out of time with Dale. I just want to say thank you so much for stopping by and being here for our launch event, for sharing your knowledge and expertise with the folks here. Can we get a hand for Dale? Awesome. We'll hug it out again.